Hey everybody. Welcome to Roll for Healing Therapeutic Game Master Roundtable. How is your PAX going so far? Awesome. We're glad you guys are here. My name is Adam Davis. I am one of the executive directors of Game to Grow, which is a nonprofit organization sponsoring this panel today. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Game to Grow before we introduce the panelists. Game to Grow is a nonprofit organization founded on the idea that games of all kinds have the power to improve people's lives. So I would like just a quick raise of your hand if you think games have improved your lives in some way. I figured that would be the case.
Good crowd.
It's a good crowd for that. Yeah. And games provide us this valuable resource. It's not just escapism, but they provide us an opportunity to get to know ourselves better, to build community with other people, and really build some important psychological and therapeutic skills. So without further ado, let's introduce the rest of the panelists. I go down the line, I guess, or in alphabetical order, whichever you'd like.
Which way is alphabetical order?
I think I would win that one.
Yeah.
You're the other.
Okay, sure. So my name is Adam Johns. I'm also the executive director for Game to Grow. I'm the other executive director for Game to Grow. I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist, and like Adam said, Game to Grow is really devoted to using games of all kinds for therapeutic growth and change. We also run 5 weekly Dungeons & Dragons groups dedicated to helping kids and teens build social skills. So we see a lot of autism-related challenges and Asperger's and ADHD and anxiety within those groups that we help on a weekly basis with nearly 40 kids each week. I guess that's me.
I'm Dr. Megan Connell. I'm a psychologist. I work out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also a therapeutic dungeon master. I run 2 all-girl D&D groups where we use D&D to help girls feel empowered, learn how to set boundaries, and advocate for themselves. And I am also have the honor of being the dungeon master for all of these guys on our clinical role, which is a Twitch-streamed game that we all play together.
Yeah. Moonfang Clan.
Moonfang Clan. Yeah. So.
Oh, if you had seen the stream last week, you would have known there would have been prizes involved.
Oh, you guys missed out.
Well, I'm Dr. B. I am, and you can see why I got saddled with just Dr. B. That was at the prison I worked at. They just didn't want to pronounce that name anymore. But I am the clinical director of Take This. Does anybody know? Raise your hand if you know who Take This is. Sweet. Okay, yeah, so we run the AFK room up in 601 if you need a break. Open all weekend. But I'm also a therapeutic DM, though these days I'm not running groups so much as developing teaching material. In fact, Dr. Megan and I are co-authoring a full-day training for other clinicians that's going to be debuting October 13th here in Seattle. Mm-hmm. So my interest has been for the last 5 years doing a lot of similar groups as these folks. But these days I'm more interested in writing about it and teaching other people how to do that. So yeah.
Awesome. So when we had the idea for this panel, a lot of us have been on lots of panels over the PAXs and over the other cons, and it's been a great opportunity for us to sort of talk at the audience. So I wanted this one to be a little bit different, and for this one to be an opportunity for this to be more like a round table where you can see sort of the ideas bouncing back and forth, because while everybody on this table is a therapeutic game master, our style and our approach are very different. And so while this is a brand new field, I want to sort of give an understanding about the different approaches that can come from this. So this panel might also feature a lot of crosstalk, so I want to enable you guys, if you want to ask a follow-up question to anybody, to feel free to do so. I'm your sort of moderator and sort of panelist. So I reached out to Twitter to see what questions people wanted us to talk about. So I took some screen caps of those tweets and put them on the slides. So if you happen to be someone whose tweet is up there, I want you to put your arms up like this and say, "That's me," just in case.
Yep.
It's noon on the first day. Do you really think they're going to be that energetic?
So
we gotta get that.
We'll talk about this later. But
has the caffeine kicked in for you guys yet? Yeah. Okay, we've got one. Yes.
We got one person.
We know who had the quad
very
shot.
Enthusiastic.
So the first one is from someone named Adam Davis. That's me.
Rigged.
The warm-up is a really important part of the therapeutic experience, and so this is your opportunity to warm up with us a little bit too. What makes therapeutic D&D different from regular D&D?
Well, I guess I'll start some of this off. So ultimately, the way I like to think about this is I like to think about it like your therapist is different from your friend that you might talk with. A really good friend could totally be there for you while you are going through something difficult. They could be supportive. They could say welcoming and helpful and supportive things. But they're not the same as a therapist. A therapist is paid and employed by you in order to be serving you. And a friendship is both ways, and you serve each other, and it's a give and a take. And a therapist is both purposefully trained and also purposefully oriented at serving you in a very specific capacity, maybe helping you through a difficult time or helping you develop the skills to overcome something difficult. I think in the same way with like a regular game that you might play and a therapeutic game that you might attend, where they're sort of a back and forth of they can both be warm and welcoming and friendly spaces. But the therapeutic game that you might attend would be like purposefully oriented at helping you to get through something or to build skills towards something.
Yeah, I think goals and objectives would be the big thing that I think really defines a therapeutic game from just playing with your friends. When you're playing with your friends, the goal is to eventually get to the big bad evil guy and level up and get the cool treasure, but therapeutically, it's to gain a skill that you can use away from the table. In a lot of ways, this is something I don't know if you guys all know this about me, but I started off my career as a music therapist. And so it's in a very similar way where with music therapy, you're playing music in a therapeutic way. It's all about the goals and objectives that you have for playing. You can still play in a band and find that fun and therapeutic to a certain extent, but that's not the purpose of playing in a band. Whereas with meeting with a music therapist or an art therapist, the purpose is to get something bigger than the experience you're having.
Do you play an instrument?
I play many instruments.
I had no idea. We could start a band. Raphael could sing.
Yeah. Yeah,
I guess Adam could sing too. I don't know.
Well, this is why when we were having that discussion about like what our IRL classes would be, I'm like, Megan's a bard.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally fair.
Yeah, no, I play flute, clarinet, bass clarinet, saxophone, piano, drums, a little bit of guitar badly.
Gross.
That's ridiculous. So I can see like a clear parallel between music therapy and art therapy and sort of Dungeons and Dragons as a form of therapy.
Yeah.
Well, so what I'll throw out there is basically this idea of, sorry, I'm reiterating this for all of you, but you all haven't heard this before. I get really excited about this, and I talk to them about this all the time. But so there was a sociological study done in 1983, the first serious study on role-playing games, and they did a form of frame analysis on gaming, largely in response to this idea that gaming loosens your grasp on reality. Bullshit. But what they found is that in order to negotiate gaming, you had to simultaneously, or I should say fluidly, go between 3 frames of playing. The first frame is the reality frame, the IRL communication between the players, like, dude, Doritos. The second frame was the rules of the game. So, like, I'm going to sneak, so I need to roll. The third frame is the character's knowledge. And in order to successfully play a role-playing game, you have to go between all 3 of those. But what I've theorized is that applied gaming adds a 4th frame. And that's the psychological frame, the intent frame. And in order to successfully be a therapeutic DM, you have to now incorporate all 4 of those frames simultaneously with purpose and intent. And you have to do it for 6 people. And it's so complicated, which is why I think all of us like to tell people there's a difference between games that have a benefit and therapeutic gaming.
Do you think games can be therapeutic without being facilitated by a therapist?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I find games quite therapeutic.
Yeah, I think my personal games are actually like really therapeutic. I think the game that we play with Megan, that we play on the stream, Clinical Role, has like an opportunity for therapy. Dr. B, you had in the most recent game, you had a pretty emotional sort of connection and reaction to some of the stuff that was happening for your character. I'm going to put you on the spot now and make you talk about that.
Yeah, that was sneaky of Megan. Yeah, God, what do you want to know about it? That hit me hard.
I guess like in the idea of the difference between role-playing games as something that's impactful to us, that's something that's been a part of I'm sure all of your lives in a way that maybe is very positive. How do you think the role is of playing a game where you have an emotional connection that might not be like necessarily about fun or joy?
Oh boy, now we're getting to like acting theory. My God. It's, you can get into a form of identity exploration, which is wonderful, and incidentally, my panel on Monday. That's going to be fun, 11 a.m. Yeah. But it allows, just in that game, that was a great opportunity for me to just explore the idea of feeling wanted and belonging, and just having the character that both wants to belong and has not belonged for so long that he's now scared of it. I mean, that in and of itself is awesome, but we're not doing it in a applied way. It just happens to be an incidental exploration and real sneaky use of props on Megan's part.
So, how many people in the audience are therapists? Okay, just a few in the audience. Great, thank you for coming and being interested in this. Do you think that there's a space where, if I'm not a therapist, but I still want to like sort of work through my own stuff at a table, that I can make some purposeful choices about how I play my character, how I can be present, but not have it be therapy or not have an expectation for therapy?
I'll jump in with this one because something I forgot to mention too is I also do a YouTube series called Psychology at the Table, which is about how layperson dungeon masters or game masters can be more accommodating and helpful for their players who struggle with different psychological issues. And I think you have to be intentional about what you do. And so like you want to communicate, like I think if you're trying to work through some sort of deep psychological issue intentionally on your own, but you don't let your game master know that, like that's going to be a mess.
Yeah, that seems like
Don't
it could
do
be
that.
a problem.
Yeah, I would say also if you discover you're working on something that you didn't realize you were putting into your character, and that just shows up at the table, also talk to your game master about that.
You mean like problems of isolation for your character and like how you're heard and the space you take up and all the things that you've worked on in every single one of your characters?
Yep, pretty much. I pretty much, every character I play, even for personal games, all end up being things that have like relevance to my childhood, my family of origin, like my need to be recognized as a human being. Like all of it comes out in my characters every single time.
Yep.
And I'll like make characters with the intention of making it not that way, and pretty much every character ends up that way.
Adam and I are basically attached at the hip for most stuff. He's basically my work wife, and I'm his work wife. And I get to be his dungeon master sometimes in personal games. And one of my favorite things to do is, no matter what kind of character he makes, I like bring it back around to his personal experience. And he goes like, I'm making a character that's totally not me. And I'm like, watch this come back around.
There it is.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Awesome. Thanks for that first question. The next question is from someone named David. David says, what medical or behavioral issues can be effectively treated by this therapy? And we have already sort of a little bit gone through the line and talked about sort of what demographics we work with, but I'm curious what your vision is for where this could go.
I want to speak to a moment of just building confidence and self-esteem. So one thing I also forgot to do in my intro is my girls groups wanted to just say this to all of you. They all say hi because I had to cancel the game to come out here. So they wanted to make sure I told everybody hi from them. But there's one girl in my groups especially who over apologizes all the time. And there's been this lovely thing that's happened organically in the group where they had a couple of different rules for her. One of them was if she did mess up on something, she could only say sorry once, and then if she wanted to continue to say sorry, she had to roll a d20, and unless she got a 20, she couldn't say sorry anymore. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm stealing that.
Yeah, it's
so
been
good.
brilliant, but also like the thing I've noticed, she's been coming several times through the group, and when I'm doing the notes for the groups, I actually am notating how often she's apologizing, and it is going down every week.
That's great. That's such a clear thing to be able to track. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And, one of the things, especially with some of the high-functioning autistic kids that I've historically worked with, a big thing that we target is just perspective taking. And, I mentioned the whole frame thing earlier, and when there's frame confusion, that in and of itself can be a problem in a therapeutic intervention. My favorite story that I like to tell, that I've definitely told all of you, is about one of the kids that we were working with who she made a total Mary Sue character, and she had a really hard time separating herself out from the character. And she played the most lawful good paladin ever. Everybody hated her.
Yeah.
Because she was such a buzzkill.
Yeah.
I want to steal things. No. And there was one day, we'd worked with her. My co-facilitator's actually here, and we worked with her for like a month or more. And then there was one day it just clicked. And this was the one time we actually allowed an evil character in our campaign because they were a lawful good paladin, and it created some great tension. But they got into this 5-minute long in-character screaming match where they were hurling insults at each other. And there I am just getting real tense, like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to write letters to parents. Oh my God, what's going on? But at the end of 5 minutes, they just started laughing, and they were cool with each other. And just so building a perspective of this is not me.
Yeah.
There's a separation between me and others. That's been one I think we've had a lot of luck, working on.
So all of us, well, I know all of our groups are dedicated, specifically oriented at social skills. Have either of you ever gotten a chance to use role-playing games to treat something maybe not directly related to social skills?
Actually, yes. So not the actual role-playing game itself, but a role-playing based intervention that I took from someone we all know, Dr. Steve Kunyak.
Oh, sure.
And that's largely, I think, based in narrative therapy ideology, that we took a character sheet, and I had this client build out who they want to be in real life. They built their real life character for who their goal was. And we used that as a template for what we were working towards. Steve can talk a lot more about how he uses it, but yeah, just using that framework, because it's an understood framework to the clients that we work with. We're joining them, we're speaking their language. And so, yeah, definitely. And I think we were working on specifically anxiety.
Yeah, a lot of the girls, it's more anxiety that we're working on. I'm also hoping to start a PTSD group at some point, but
I think the possible application for PTSD sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Like if you guys just imagine like how much your imagination plays a role within PTSD and how much Dungeons and Dragons is incorporated into imagination. Adam and I have definitely talked about the possible application with veterans or with anybody struggling with PTSD as a really great application for role-playing games.
I think they're doing that in a Texas VA right now.
Yeah, we have
They're-
that's Elizabeth and
Jared.
Oh yeah, that was the same thread I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
But we've also talked about working with elderly patients or clients and with role-playing games. I think that would be amazing.
that'd be awesome.
I think that there's something to be said. Hawk Robinson's been doing some great work with people with challenges related to mobility, and I think that also may be a really great place. Is there anything that role-playing games can't solve?
That's a good question.
I meant that as this is kind of a joke,
thinking.
but I actually meant that as a serious
Well,
question.
I would be cautious about using it when it comes to psychotic disorders.
Yeah.
We do have occasionally people will contact us and want to do intakes, but they have a difficulty, I won't say inability, but a difficulty discerning between reality and imagination, and that's something that we don't feel is probably the best solution for them.
Yeah.
Well, but at the same time, the old school wisdom is psychotic disorders are generally contraindicated for group therapy in general. So,
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah.
For those who aren't therapists, that means psychotic disorders don't do well in group therapy.
yeah.
Contraindicated.
Sorry.
I mean, well, and I think there's some stuff that would be very difficult to address, like eating disorders, sleeping disorders.
I don't think it would do very well for like if you broke your leg.
Yeah, probably. Well, but I mean,
But that's not a behavioral issue.
It could
That's
pass
true.
the time, and it make you feel
That's
better. And if you're
true.
feeling better, your body
and there's
actually
a lot
does
of
feel
research,
better. So.
Yeah, that says that like if you're doing really well,
Yeah.
Oh,
if you got like a
man.
positive attitude, that helps with the healing process. Maybe it does.
Yeah, but that's mood.
Role
That's
playing
not the
games
leg.
can fix your broken legs, everyone.
Yes.
That's what we've established here, definitively.
Awesome.
Dr. B established that.
Yep.
You can attribute that to him.
No.
Dr. B 2018.
So if you break your leg, join a D&D group.
Yeah.
Dr. B does not recommend that. Well, I mean, yes, he does, but not for the leg. Not for the leg. For your personal enjoyment. I can dig upwards, right?
The next question is about how we actually talk about this to our players. So Sean asks, how do you explain it to the players in a way that ensures they understand the purpose, the therapeutic intent of the game, and also builds the hype for the game?
I kind of sell it off the title of my group, which my group's called the Self-Rescuing Princess.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And so the girls kind of, as soon as I tell them what the title is, they get what it's about and they get excited. So.
I don't.
You don't sell it?
Oh, I don't sell it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, a lot of the kids that come to me, their parents have put them in so many social skills groups by that point that if they know they're going to another social skills group that's a pure skills group, they will bolt. So I kind of wean them into it slowly. That, oh yeah, I just learned something. I know. It was a Jedi mind trick. What's up?
I have had my players say I'm like Mr. Miyagi.
This is
Because
your-
I introduce things to them slowly, and I get them to practice things, and they realize it's useful.
Roll on, roll
There
off.
was actually a group that was frustrated with me because I wasn't teaching them enough skills, and they were like, "I'm tired of this Mr. Miyagi stuff." Awesome! That's exactly where I want you to be. I want
So
you to
excited.
want to learn these skills. That's fantastic.
Adam and I sometimes talk about there's a drama therapy model that's all about engagement called the 5-phase model. Is that right?
Five-phase model of drama therapy is not something I'll give you the whole brief on, but it basically gives a sort of acknowledgement that there are phases or steps along the way before you can get to the therapeutic outcomes. And for many people in a drama therapy context, you might start off with like a drama warm-up game where we might make up a story together or toss a koosh ball back and forth and do some word association. And that might not look like the outcomes you want, down the line for the powerful therapeutic outcome. But for some people, that is an amazing leap from where they were before. So for some of our players who come and sit down at a table, they're sitting down at a table with other people, and that's huge for them because a lot of our players are very socially isolated, have a lot of trouble connecting with other people. So even to sit down and have a character sheet and look at other people and converse is a huge sign of success. So we sort of have an outline for the phases that players go through. So by the time they're later on in their experience with the game and in the experience of how we run it, we can actually do much more targeted interventions where their characters going through a journey that they realize is an analog for their life. So they're very intentionally building skills. But for some kids, they're going to take turns fighting spiders in a dungeon, and that's really therapeutic for them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think that like a big part of the hype of it is really just that Dungeons and Dragons or any role playing game is a lot of fun. You want to come back every week. You get like that feeling that you're missing your game and that you're really ready to come back. And when you have to cancel a game, you're like, oh man, I really needed that this week. And I feel like that is a big part of the sell by itself. And so you can get the intro of you're going to come in and play Dungeons and Dragons, and even when you couple that along with you're also going to learn social skills and you're going to learn how to interact with other people and you're going to learn how to navigate friendships. Yeah, that's all good. But Dungeons and Dragons, I get to come back and I get to play that every week.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge portion of that hype that you get to build in.
Well, and this isn't a hype for the players, but a hype for the parents that I get a lot is this is a chance for, and again, I do girls groups, so your daughters to make friends where they work together and there's not that competitive edge. I got feedback from one parent where they were telling me that they see their daughter with their friends from school and that there's a lot of meanness in everything that was said, but when they were hanging out with their D&D friends, they were just laughing and joking and supportive of one another. And so talking about a friendship where it's not about competing, it's about cooperation is a big sell for the parents at least.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true.
So this is a two-part question, which is all about characters. How do we use characters as part of the therapeutic journey? So Ariana says, how does character creation relate to the presenting problems? For example, would an anxious client always tend to make a confident character as a way to experiment with that? How can or should therapists coach character creation?
Ariana, you ask very complicated questions.
That is, wow.
This is my favorite question.
Can I take the first swing at this?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, so one thing that I do is I ask all my players to make a character that is strong in something they feel weak in. But I don't specifically ask them what that thing is or have them tell me what it is. But also, as a psychologist, I know, and we've already talked about this a little bit, no matter what kind of character you make, your issues are going to come out. So you don't really need to worry about it as much because it does come out, and it does come out at the table, and then gives you these wonderful opportunities to start working through things.
Stupid Freud.
You know, there's actually a couple of different camps for therapists where there are some therapists that really believe that when an issue is ready for somebody to work on it, they're going to bring it up in therapy, and you don't need to do any explicit guidance. It's specifically called client-led therapy. And then there are other camps that are more about the idea that it's the therapist's job to bring it up and to make you sort of confront the things that you're struggling with because they know that you're purposefully avoiding those things. And there's no specific evidence dictating which one of those is a stronger camp. I think largely Adam and I don't dictate the kinds of characters or the kinds of backstories that players come in with, and we assume mostly that that the character you make is the one you need to play. And a lot of the times that means that you're going to make a character and you're going to... I had a player in a game make a character that was Nicolas Cage, and it was like an amalgamation of Nicolas Cage across many movies. So he would make reference. He was kind of Ghost Rider, and then he would make references to like his face coming off while being Ghost Rider.
Anything from Moonstruck?
No, he didn't do anything with his hand or anything like that. I feel like there was a missed opportunity there.
There really was.
He did do some stuff with some bees, though. That was a special power he had.
Kiss the Vampire?
No.
Oh, God, you're missing some good Cage there.
Right? There's some really crazy Cage I think he could have gone off the rails with. But like ultimately, I can't say that Nicolas Cage is like a really good therapeutic character for him to dive into.
Quote that, all right?
Because Nicolas Cage is a dangerous character for anyone to play, just so you know. If anybody's watched that episode of Community, man, Nicolas Cage he's a scary, scary character. But at the same time, like he played the character he needed to play, and throughout that campaign, while he continued to make like Nicolas Cage references, he also changed his character from being like a solo kind of Nicolas Cage, I'm going to go off on my own character, to being more, I'm going to work in a team, and I'm going to be like Nicolas Cage from The Rock instead, and I'm going to have to team up with Sean Connery. And it was a steady shift over the course of the campaign, while this player was particularly working on launching into graduating high school and going on to college. So it was a really great transition for him, and I never would have expected that from the beginning of him saying, I want to make Nicolas Cage as a character.
And we've had a lot of players, because we've been running groups for a while, so we've had some players stay in groups for years, and we've seen characters change. Like a lot of times they'll keep the same character for the entire time they're with us, but sometimes they'll pick a new character. And I had a player very similar came in with, has anybody ever played the video game Franbo? So it's a really creepy video game where the main character is a like 11-year-old female who is crazy and sees lots of horrific things, and they have a cat that talks to them. And this player basically made Franbo, and this player was struggling with depression, isolation. Nobody understood them, so Franbo is a perfect analog to their experience in life. And so this character had a real struggle connecting with other people, much like that player did. And so over the time that player got a chance to interact with the group and feel welcome, no longer identifying with Franbo, his next character he came in was a member of the Mafia. who like always had his boys around, and all of a sudden this person had a team always. He was like, I have a magic device that lets me call to Mafia for backup. And just the transition from the person who did not value social contact at all to someone who made a character founded on his relationship with a team that had his back was an amazing journey to see that player go through.
How'd you explain that one to his parents?
Explaining what?
The mafia involvement. Well, because I'm semi-joking about that, but one of the concerns that I know all of us get from some parents, especially if they're not as well versed in geekery, is this idea that will it build antisocial behaviors in my kid? Yeah. And so part of me is like legitimately curious. How do you explain that one?
I mean, ultimately, it's a pro-social move, right?
That's true.
It's
relational.
You make a character that's incredibly isolated, that's
true.
Only has one friend, and now you made a character that like literally is part of a great family.
A great
family. The family. But ultimately, like I suppose taking on characters that are like tropes of crime families maybe is not like ultimately a great
not on the surface
social move on the surface, but at the same time it's a social construct, and it is a game that is based in adventure. Mm-hmm. I think that for this particular player, the family has like a strong understanding of how valuable the group has already been for them, so they knew that they're seeing progress, and so it was never a concern. But it is a concern for some parents to talk about, like, my kid came home from the game and they talked about how they were like slaughtering orcs in the game. What are you doing here? I'd be curious how you explain some of that stuff.
I've started doing a weekly email to parents, so I do the first paragraph is a quick summary of what we did in the game, what kind of behavioral things that they learned, and then I always try to give them 2 questions to ask their child to engage in conversation about the game.
Oh man, that's a great idea.
It takes a lot of time, but
yeah.
it's worthwhile. And then then the rest of it is just information on upcoming games or other resources that they can pass along to their kiddos. So that's been a really great way of just having communication with the parents.
From the idea that like as they see the whole storyline as it's coming together and they see all the other pieces of it, that they aren't just going to get the one story about how they behaved.
Yeah, because the kids are going to go home and they're going to talk about, like, I've got one of my groups, they're getting ready to go and have to deal with a red dragon who's actually in prison and being guarded by other dragons. And so they're going to have to work with these other dragons to try and parlay with this red dragon. And so they're going to come home and just talk about how they got to fight dragons and do all this stuff. Well, when the email goes, we learned about negotiation and how to get what you want in a difficult situation. And we did that through this negotiation with dragons.
Yeah.
So
but isn't the struggle against dragons the Jungian symbolism for evil?
Possibly.
I really don't. I don't
know anything about
I'm behaviorist, so I actually don't know. But okay,
it's so rich, though. I feel like there's something so good in all the Jungian symbol stuff.
Oh man. Well, God, I'm thinking about this question, and I, similarly to Megan, I direct it just a little bit. I often ask our kids, what's something you'd like to be better at? And let's build a character that can focus on exactly that. And I'll scaffold it a little bit. But, to kind of go into the second question, or the second tweet. Or did we even get to that?
It's a different tweet.
We haven't read this one yet. Do you want to read it to us, Raphael?
Oh, yeah. How to transfer personal player struggles into character arcs in a way that allows safe confrontation. Can it be done without talking to the player in order to help them? I will talk to the player and the parent. I'm actually, I did what you did for like a month until I couldn't keep up with it anymore. It is so much work.
Yeah.
You are so dedicated.
I send the same email to all the parents, so it's 2 emails.
It's still a lot of work.
It's a lot to write all that stuff.
It is.
Yeah. But I will also sometimes give parents and the student that we're working with a question or a goal for like observation in the community. Like one of the big ones I love asking them to work on together is try and spot people who act like your character wants to act. What are they doing? Notice it. What's their tone of voice? How loud are they? Are they interrupting people? I ask a lot. But the autism is fun to work with. A lot of blurting out.
Yeah.
Love my Aspie kids. But that's what I'll give the parents to work with, and the student is do some observational homework. Be a scientist. Look into the wild. You're observing people. That's your goal this week.
I think one of the things that like works so well about that idea is that the skills for social skill building are also the same skills you need to be like a really good player at a table. And the translation between those is so similar. Like you really want to play your character, like think about how people talk, think about how people carry their bodies, and think about how you can be an exchange with other players at the table rather than just sort of being your character out into the open, but make it a play that happens off of other tables, other characters. I feel like those are all great just role-playing tips for anybody trying to be a better player at a table. And it's a lot of the same tips you might give for social skill development too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And to the second part too of what I've done with some of my clients is I actually let them develop monsters. So I have one client who made a depression monster, which is a gelatinous ooze golem. And they made a depression curse and all kinds of things to go along with it. And it actually inspired me, and I made an anxiety monster because anxiety is something I struggle with a lot. And so there'll be times when we'll do a fight, and then at the end of the fight, I'll ask the group, what did you think of this? And they fought the anxiety monster, and they were all like, I hated this. And I said, well, this is a monster I made, and it's anxiety. And they all kind of, eyes got wide, and they're like, I hate it even more now.
Does it have so many arms? I think my anxiety monster would have so many arms.
It's actually a small, teeny demon that creates a gigantic shadow, and the shadow is what fights the
that's good. That's so
monster.
good. Talk about Jungian.
Yeah.
That's spectacular.
Yeah, but the shadow is positive in Jungian archetypes, I'm told.
Oh, then it's a Play-Doh thing?
I don't know. I don't know.
Shadow
the
on
colored
the
dough
cave
that you
walls?
played with as a kid?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
That's how I
Something
like
about
to
a
refer to
cave
it.
and a wall and graffiti. I don't know.
So I feel like there's a piece of transferring struggle into character arc that is about this idea of how you, as you take your character and as your character goes through their journey, and they're going to evolve. Really good stories have characters that evolve and change. And one of the biggest things that I think maybe we probably all do for 4 characters in our groups is as the character evolves and changes, you get a chance to reflect and be a part of that change that your character goes through. And whether or not you're playing a character because the character is the same as you, or whether or not you're playing a character because it's explicitly not the same as you, either way, as that character goes through their arc and they change as a character, you get a chance to see that change and to be a part of that change. And I think that's a big part of why this works so well as a therapeutic modality, because you get to be involved in the character's change, but from enough of a displacement to see it and to feel not attacked by it, or to feel not defensive by that.
Well, it's a completely externalized framework, and it's a predictable framework. And ideally, if you've got a DM that you trust, and you can, I mean, we all mentioned this earlier, if you've got questions, talk to your DM. But you're bringing up the idea that we all talked about earlier as well, is that's intentionality. You know, basically targeting each character's struggles in a sequential way.
Yeah.
And for our groups, when we understand the kind of character that a player is making, we then can determine how we want that story arc to assist them in that therapeutic growth. So we have some players, we talked about this earlier, who make aspirational characters, who are the person that they want to be. And then our goal when working with an aspirational character is to put them in circumstances where the player can feel successful as their character. So if a shy person, sort of going back to the first question, if a shy person does happen to make a very confident character, then we give that player an opportunity to have their character be in a place where being confident is rewarding and successful. And then the power of using the second person pronoun is we can then say, you did an amazing job convincing that person. Wow, you are really confident right now. and really put that on them. So the success of their character is now their success. So they can translate some of that feeling of I did a good job at this thing in order to build confidence. We can put that from their character onto them. Whereas oftentimes if we have people who don't make these aspirational selves, but they make what we call the looking glass self, which is just them going into a fantasy world, they might put some of their own sort of struggles and maladaptive stuff into their character, sort of like my Franbo example earlier, where there we want to sort of disincentivize, put in a little bit of obstacle to the maladaptive behaviors and get them to restructure it. A lot of our players, the ones who are 10, 11, who maybe have a little bit of ADHD type behaviors, they make characters who are very impulsive. And so it's pretty obvious when you have a young person who is dealing with some impulsivity, and we talk about this in our intakes with parents, and then they make a barbarian who wants to run in and hit things. And that's all they want to do. And then we have an opportunity to pause, give some sort of meta moments where we can go like, so this is what your character wants to do. Your character does not want to think about this. Your character wants to go in and do this right away, but now let's build up some strategies. Let's bounce some ideas off of other people about maybe why that's maybe not a good idea, and then we translate those skills so they can learn and grow through their character.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
Yeah, that's great.
The next question, sort of a general question that could be useful for any game master if anybody plays games at a game store and maybe doesn't know all their players, the players don't know each other that well. How do you introduce players to each other if they weren't friends beforehand? Do you ever run into friction between players? And Raffael, you talked about this a little bit already. And how do you smooth it out? Or do you?
I actually often don't necessarily go out of my way to introduce everybody because, as you guys said earlier, it's enough that they're there for a lot of the kids we work with. And if they are there to play a game, cool, I will sneak in the introductions that way. I will be crafty about it, but I will not be like, who's ever been in a job where they make you do those warm-up exercises?
Yeah.
I actually love
Keep
those.
your hand up. I hate them. Keep your hand up if you enjoy all those getting to know you. Okay, there's like 3 people, 4 people in the room. The rest of you are like,
I am a drama therapist. That's sort of my thing.
Yeah.
I love those things.
So yeah, and most of the kids who come to us, they're like, I don't want to do that stupid stuff again. So you know what? Great. Let's get to playing. Let's get to know each other. But one of the things we do is we make sure to have, as part of things, at least 15 minutes of unstructured time, both as free-form socializing, but also as a transitional time before we go up to start playing, and we move into a different room to do that. And that ends up offering a lot of opportunity for unsolicited socializing, especially as they get comfortable with each other's characters. And they'll often talk about the game itself, but then it's an opportunity for them to chat about other things, especially if somebody brings their Switch.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well,
this is like the importance of a waiting room.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I see that a lot with my players where they're hanging out in the waiting room. They try to get there about a half hour early because Southeast Psych, we're the coolest psychological practice in the country. We have a movie theater in our waiting room. We have gaming systems. We have a studio. It's a really cool space anyway.
It's so angry.
It's pretty super cool. Yeah.
I want it all. It's jealous. Everything right now.
But one of the things I've done is the campaign I'm running is an ongoing story. And so when we get new players in, they're sort of just thrust into the middle of the story. And so what I've started doing is saying, okay, you need to make a connection with somebody who's a returning player of some kind. And so I basically ask a returning player to adopt one of the new players and to make a connection. I had a cleric player who, one of the new characters, was the first person she ever healed. And so always was then, it created this great relationship between the two players because the cleric always would heal this character first. It's like, I have to keep the person that I healed first alive no matter what. So that helps, and I'm going to brag on my players because they're awesome. They have a group chat going, and as soon as there's a new player in there, the first thing they do is they make sure that they are put into the group chat. They all invite each other to their birthday parties, and the trend has been whoever's birthday it is, they dungeon master for everybody else. Yeah.
That's great. I like that a lot.
They're awesome. So
I think we do kind of a similar thing where we Has anybody ever played Dungeon World? Dungeon World's a great game. In Dungeon World, there's a bonds system that is a big part of the experience of how you level up and things like that. But one of the things that bonds do is that you have to build some kind of a relationship with somebody else in the group. Oftentimes in Dungeon World, bonds are like adversarial to some extent, but they can be friendly, they can be adversarial, and they're sort of a single sentence frame of your relationship with somebody else that you may have established. And so we like to do that a little bit when we're really trying to get a group to get together and to be cooperative with each other, and we don't want to do like a classic tavern you all just met each other scene, where we'll say, cool, everybody knows each other a little bit. And we're going to make up a short backstory thing about how you know the player next to you, or how your character knows the player's character who is next to you. And that really helps a lot for building those initial
I've been wanting to adopt a Fiasco style.
And we've been
thing.
debating that too.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we all need to talk about that.
Yeah, we maybe create our own table for that. Fiasco, for those of you who don't know, is we see some cheers for that already. No, Fiasco is a really amazing DM-less role-playing game where your goal is to basically create a disastrous Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's super fun because it doesn't have a dungeon master, and so everybody's really at the table together playing roles and playing characters, and you let a big portion of the dice kind of dictate how the story's going to go a little bit. It's great. It's a great framework for a lot of that.
But the beginning of it is really similar to what Adam just said about you. Everybody at the table has to have a relationship to each person sitting next to them, and the first whole round of the game is rolling to create that. Like maybe one person, okay, well they worked together, but we don't know how yet. And then the next roll around will say, well, they worked at the pharmacy together. How did that work? Well, I was stealing pills from them. They were my boss. And that's the role that they'll play. So it's a really cool way of introducing that stuff.
We actually just did a summer camp last week over at Mox Boarding House in Ballard, and we had the players all sitting at the table. We did an improv game, just a yes and activity. We taught the way to make up a story with yes and then we got them in a group, and then had them say something that was true about their relationship, and then the other person who was that was related to had to say yes and then add something else to it. So we let them build a mutual.
Oh, that's fun.
A mutual storyline between them. So it was like, we used to work at the university together. Another person was like, yeah, and I used to sneak in and steal stuff. And it was a perfect way for them to still maintain their own character while still saying yes and to other people.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, go for it.
Please do. I'm noticing the time, and I want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. So we're going to do the next questions a little bit abbreviated. This one is a pretty simple question, but with a lot of complicated answers. How do you measure success?
From a behavioral standpoint, for me, that's a lot easier because I do take a fairly behavioral standpoint, and I have very targeted behavioral things like how many times they talk out of turn or how many times they have a delay of game, and that stuff we can track fairly easily. So my suggestion is make what's not quantifiable.
Yeah, as much as I'm not a behaviorist, I do similar.
You are so a behaviorist, you just
not.
don't know it.
No.
You're just doing the hippy-dippy behaviorism.
Is
I
that
like
a
my
form of
hippy-dippy.
I've never heard of a hippy-dippy behaviorism.
Act.
That's what he calls acceptance and commitment therapy.
That is technically third wave CBT.
I guess, how do we measure success? I think most of it is like, if the kids in our groups exchange phone numbers with each other, man, that's a huge success.
Oh, yeah.
If they hang out outside of the group in any way, oftentimes that's a gigantic success for the kids in our group. But we also do a lot of we touch base with parents every quarter and do a phone call and talk about their goals and talk about what kinds of successes they're seeing at home and changes, either good or bad, that they're seeing outside of the group. And a lot of the successes really come from the parents' report of what they're seeing from their kid. And it's not always directly related to necessarily the group. Sometimes it's just they're so much more warm and welcoming, and they want to have dinner with the whole family now as opposed to eating in their own room. And sometimes our parents will say, I don't know what you're doing exactly, but I know that it seems to be working.
I had at the end of the, so we run a group every quarter of the school year, and then we do something different over the summer, like summer camps. But the end of the school year group, I had players, and like I said, our players are often very socially isolated and struggle connecting with other people, and my players all hugged each other at the end of the quarter and said, "Oh man, I'm gonna miss you. I'll see you in the fall." And that, as someone who's working with these kids, was like I almost cried watching them do this, and had to be like, "That's amazing." See you guys in the fall. The last question before we get to the Q&A is from Kelly. How do you help game-curious but not game-experienced clinicians feel comfortable stepping into the DM role? This could be something that you might say is good advice for how do you convince anybody to step into a GM role, but how do you convince therapists to step into a GM role?
Of course, Kelly asked that.
Yeah.
See our upcoming training.
Talk a little about the training, I think.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
The training that Megan and I are writing it's taking a pan-theoretical approach. Basically, we're not dictating how you're going to approach this from any theoretical orientation. In fact, the way we're constructing this, you can apply it from any theoretical orientation. Because as a therapist, you know your own theoretical orientation. You know the limits. I mean, I joked about Jungian stuff and behaviorism, but cognitive behavioralism is the language I speak. So anytime I see somebody else bringing in an intervention, I translate it into cognitive behavioral therapy. Megan translates it in her head to something different. Mm-hmm. Adam translate it into something different. So as long as you know that system real well, then all you need to do is now learn the framework of the game and the limits of this new framework and how to mesh the two. So really, you're not doing anything new except learning a game and how to use it. And that's what the training is based on. So what I would say to other clinicians is this is a way of building instant rapport with people. And since 30% of the change that you see in therapy has to do with the relationship, you want to build a relationship the best you can. So meet the client where they are. And if that's playing games, great, play games.
I do think it's really hard to learn how to be a dungeon master. It's a big hurdle from being a player to being a dungeon master. Oftentimes, the advice that we offer to like parents who are interested in starting to run groups with their own kids or things like that is start with easier storytelling games. Even something as simple as like story cubes, where you're collaboratively telling a story together, or what's the fantasy?
Once Upon a Time.
Once Upon a Time. Games that give a structure to telling a story, because functionally that's what all role-playing games are. Is that they are a structure to being able to tell a story in a collaborative way, and to ease your way into taking on a dungeon master role as opposed to like a similar level storytelling role. But there are sort of simpler examples of being able to do that. And actually, Adam and I are also, with Game to Grow, developing a take-home kit specifically designed to help introduce therapists and educators and parents to Dungeons & Dragons as like an easy way to get into it, and also designed specifically for helping with autism-related challenges as a form of intervention, as a base foundation kit to get you started with that, called Critical Core. You can sign up for the mailing list at criticalcore.org.
When's the Kickstarter happening for that?
We hope in October, but we really need interest and we need excitement for it, and that's a big part of it. So if not October, maybe November, but the more people who sign up, the faster we can get it out.
Sign up for Critical Core.
Sign up, because it sounds cool.
It's really cool.
We actually do a lot of consultations with therapists who want to start being therapeutic game masters, and it's amazing just how many therapists want to do this, and then are like, so how do you get points?
Yeah. How do you win?
Yeah.
How do you win the game?
How do you win? Yeah.
So we got to back up a little bit.
You win the game by giving me all the loot.
And that's why we're creating Critical Core. So before we do Q&A, there is a microphone right there. You can start lining up right now if you would like to. Important thing about questions is we only have about 5 minutes before the room needs to be cleared out. So if you have a question, I would love it for it to be short and possibly have an upward inflection, and there's something you want to know. So if you want to see us playing Dungeons & Dragons together with Megan, we mentioned this earlier, but Clinical Role is where you can do that at twitch.tv/geekslikeus.
We play every other Monday.
Yep.
And it's super fun and silly, and I talk in voices, and Adam talks in voices, and Raphael is a stern version of himself.
And I try to make them all cry.
Starting kind of angry.
I'm
yeah.
irritated so much.
Yeah.
It really is. And the other thing that I want to show you is Critical Core is the thing we just dropped knowledge about a moment ago. Criticalcore.org. The artwork is amazing, and we are going to be down at our table outside of Uncle's Games after this. If you want to talk to Adam or I about Critical Core, anything like that, we'd be happy to talk to you.
Don't you guys have a panel after this?
Yeah.
After the next panel.
After.
That's right. In this
1:30.
room about playing games with kids. Anyway, let's do some questions.
All right, so short and sweet. Have you ever done adult therapy for things like PTSD? And if so, is there a different approach you'd use?
Haven't yet, hoping to soon. But I don't think the approach would change very much.
We've been talking with Jared Kilmer, who's been doing some work with PTSD down in Texas using role-playing games, and from what it sounds like, the approach is very similar, but obviously with some purposeful adjustments for the adult audience and also the particular challenges of PTSD.
I would imagine you have to have a lot of homogeneity in the group. I mean, you can't have a lot of different trauma types that you're dealing with.
I was relating back and forth via email with somebody who was doing some PTSD work with D&D, and they were talking about the amazing benefits that come from having a like group of brother in arms, is the way that they talked about it. That there's a lot of like similar things, maybe aren't necessarily focused on relieving symptoms, but there's like a camaraderie that comes from being an adventuring party that is really therapeutic for some of the people that they were working with.
Yeah,
Thanks for the question.
Do you have any advice for someone who is a player that wants to start exploring their issues with their DM?
Talk with your DM. If your DM's not comfortable with it, you're not going to be able to do that.
I would also say think about the characters you've played in the past and how you have already brought in pieces of yourself into those characters. And that may actually be a good sort of guidance for understanding, like, you have done this already. If you're an experienced player, you 100% have already brought some of your own issues into the game. It's just a matter of being cognizant of it or being intentional about how you're bringing that into the game. Obviously, it means a lot to have a dungeon master who's on board with the whole process, and that's definitely necessary. But assuming they are, you can start thinking about, okay, what is it that I have brought into my characters before? Have I worked through those things, or should I really put some focus on playing that character again and in a more intentional way?
I would also say having a personal therapist would be super helpful, so that your dungeon master doesn't end up being everything. I'm a big fan of my therapist, and I think everybody should go to therapy. And it's a really useful thing if you're wanting to do some identity exploration or anything like that with your character, understanding trauma or personal identity or whatever the case is. It's always useful to have a space to talk to somebody who is not also trying to keep track of hit points and make sure the game is fun and all that stuff if they're not ready to do that. That'd be my advice.
But and I want to throw on there, especially if for anybody who wants to do this with a trauma-related thing, the speed at which you do it is really important. And if you a very big temptation I've noticed, especially amongst vets, is they want to get it done. They want to get things fixed like quick now and in a hurry. You can't do that with trauma. Yeah. In fact, you risk re-traumatizing if you do things too quickly. Yeah. So I double endorse the idea of have your own personal therapist on the side who's kind of talking you through this as well.
Yeah. We're super short on time. Let's shotgun the last as many questions.
So mine's
as we
gonna
can.
quickly build on that one, but I just want to confirm this. Even if you're with this model, do you guys feel comfortable that people without clinical experience on the DM or the group can still do it?
I wouldn't do therapy.
Yeah,
Not
well, not
therapy.
therapy, but like a minor version of it, like just like support or like not even.
You can be a friend.
You can be a friend.
like-
You can be supportive. Yeah.
Yeah, but they just shouldn't kind of enter that space with that idea of like, yeah, let's go deal with anxiety or trauma or any of these things. Yeah,
Right.
so
No.
just making
Not unless
sure.
you're a therapist.
I'm actually not a licensed therapist. I have training in drama therapy, but my background is in education. So I run therapeutic groups, but if something comes to the table that I am not qualified to treat, I will not. That's an important thing that ethically I have to do. If somebody comes and says, I want to work on trauma, that's not my training. So then I would put them at Adam's table, or we would have to figure out a way to navigate that space.
Yeah.
Do you see this therapy DMing being exclusively in person, or is this something you could see being done on stuff like Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, something online?
There's a lot. There's a lot of ways to put this. There's other risk factors that you have to take up. Oh, we're at time. Think about when you're talking about telehealth and teletherapy. Insurance does consider basically Skype sessions to be therapeutic, but there's a lot of more risk things that you have to consider with doing that. And so possibly, but there would be a lot more things you have to think about on your ethics side. So.
Since we're out of time, I think we have to call there. If you have last questions, we would love to answer questions at the end. We are...
You can come up here.
Yeah, I guess you can come up here and ask questions.
They don't have to go anywhere.
We're on the next panel, so we're going to stay right here at the stage.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you guys.
We really appreciate you coming to our panel, and have a great PAX.